Well, it's another 60 minutes of topical news analysis. This is Media Monitor, and I'm your host, Alicia Jali. A very good morning to each and every one of you. Thank you so much for joining us. In today's show, we start by looking at the operations and audit outcomes of the state-owned entities as well as the country's municipalities. We ask, how should South Africa deal with the land reforms? We also look at the allegations that State Security Minister David Mahlobo has close ties with a Mpumalanga businessman known to be involved in illegal rhino horn trade. And we also delve once again into the higher education funding issue. Statistician General Pali Lehohla points out the burden faced by South Africa's universities. But first, as always, it's 900 hours. Time for your news headlines. President Jacob Zuma has called on NC members to be vigilant and guard against Western countries, which he says are funding certain political parties and individuals plotting a regime change in South Africa. The president was addressing party members attending the party's cadre forum in KwaDukuza, north of Durban. President Zuma says the ruling party must always strive to get a two-thirds majority during elections so that it can pass any law without relying on other parties in parliament. Deputy President Cyril Ramaphosa will this afternoon release the report of advisors to the National Economic Development and Labour Council on the level at which the national minimum wage should be set. Ramaphosa says a NEDLEG meeting comprising of leaders, labour, business, government and communities will discuss the proposal in Johannesburg and publicise it. He says the meeting will also deal with instability in the labour market as well as protracted and violent strikes. And a survivor of an incident in which a cruise liner caught fire on the Hartbeespoort Dam near Brits in the northwest has spoken of how terrified she was. Search and rescue teams have been unable to find more bodies following yesterday's incident. 3 women drowned in the incident while a 4th burned to death while trapped in a toilet. Local boats sailed to the rescue and picked up scores of passengers. Emergency services spokesperson say there were about 200 people aboard, and this survivor says she was shocked to see flames in the cruise liner's kitchen. All right, now a quick look at the big hashtags of the weekend. For this segment, we're very pleased to be joined by Dini Lohlanga Mekuto, SABC Digital News producer. Dini, a very good morning to you. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, it's a pleasure, Alicia.
Dini, what were the big hashtags? I can tell you my own list, but go ahead and give it to us.
So we started off on a controversial note this week with the expose of State of Security Minister David Mahlobo being involved with rhino poaching kingpins. So people took on that one in a big way. So DJC Williams is saying, so David Mahlobo is the reason rhino poaching never stops in SA. Hashtag Minister of State Security. And then another tweet from Untouchable Moto. How do we expect rhino poaching to end when the Minister of State Security, David Mahlobo, hangs out with the poachers? We are led by thugs. That's what he's alleging.
Very interesting. Let's welcome our guest this morning on the panel. We do have media analyst Mr. Tebogo Detsejo as well as social commentator Mr. Shoni Makari. Gentlemen, a very good morning to both of you. Thank you for joining us.
Good morning.
What did you make of this development, Tebogo?
Well, it was quite tricky because if you look at what the minister has done, it's difficult because a lot of people want to take pictures with you. And you can't say no because you need to be seen as for the people, by the people, of the people. What shocked me on social media was a tweet by Figile Tubu on Twitter, @Figile who exposed a nanny who assaulted an infant who looked 1 month old, assaulting the infant as if she were fighting someone of adult age over and over again. And I think we need to be very careful who we entrust with the duties and responsibility of taking care of our children. But more importantly, I think I'd like to make a call to South Africans that if people do that to your babies, make sure that the law takes its course. They need to face the full might of the law.
Very interesting indeed. I think we also had a similar incident last year where the nanny was actually beating up in Uganda. Yeah, very interesting that this is also coming up now. Shani, but what did you make of ministers' pictures and the allegations that have been leveled? I know we're going to talk about it in greater detail, but what did you make of the social media reactions?
Well, I think, if you're a Minister of State Security, as I've indicated in many occasions, that, it's not just what you do, how you appear in public also is very important. So I would think that places that you visit on a regular basis would be looked at, so that you're not found. You don't find yourself in situations like this, whether intended or not. I agree with Tebogo that if you're a minister, of course, you would want to mingle with people and so on. But again, you need to make sure that the people you're mingling with have been vetted.
Can you take us through to the next big hashtag?
The next one was, as you know, we started off the year on a racist note with Penny Sparrow. It looks like we're ending on that footing again with the coffin assault in Mpumalanga.
What's all this?
So this is the data collected on the actual hashtag coffin assault. So we had about 37,000 tweets in a space of about 3 days. And we had a very influential tweet from a gentleman there that's coming up from Tandiweyo, who was just comparing how Mcebo Dlamini appeared in court versus how the two men who assaulted this guy appeared in court. He's saying white privilege much, I guess. Mcebo Dlamini ankle cuffed in court and coffin guy is not cuffed in court. Hashtag court assault. You can see Mcebo in shackles there. And the two white guys that assaulted that black man, free.
Gentlemen, I mean, are we ever going to hear the end of racism in this country anytime soon? Tebogo?
I think it's very important that today we'll be discussing the land issue, because that is central to us dealing with racism. We've been historically dispossessed, and our struggle against apartheid, central to that was us getting back the land. And I think that once we do that, we'll be able to solve a lot of the other economic challenges. But we need to start with the land. I mean, it's very important for us to do that. Otherwise, it's going to continue.
Shawnee, a quick one.
No, I think racism, to say will we ever defeat it? It's difficult to say. It's going to be a very long journey. I mean, look at America; they're still grappling with these race issues, and they supposedly dealt with it a lot earlier than we did. So yeah, it's going to take a while.
Not a good example, so you're saying then, Shawnee. Did you take us through to our final big hashtag of this week? What was it?
Hashtag Tibo Touch, hashtag MTN, data must fall prices.
Have they fallen?
Remember who were here when he came out saying, I'm fighting this struggle, people back me up. And now he came out this week saying, guys, the struggle has been won. The data prices have fallen, but people are saying Tibo Touch udlala. So Mhleng is saying, wasn't it Tibo Touch who said something along the lines, there's no purpose to have cheap data between... Okay, so this one is saying he doesn't have a backbone, this guy. And then someone else is saying, if anything, respect Tibo Touch more. The man is a genius. That's why he's so successful. He played the entire black Twitter. He's my Mr. Miyagi. You know why he's saying this? Because Tibo Touch now seems to be promoting some information from MTN, some data bundle for $8.99. So they're saying, this one is captured.
I don't know. Should we go on talking about this? Do you want to comment there, gentlemen? Is there anything you want to say?
No comment.
No comment, Dini. Thank you so much.
So make sure you follow SABC News online.
Give us the
on
URL.
Twitter, it's SABC News Online, and Facebook, SABC News Online. On YouTube, you can get us at SABC Digital News. Also, Media Monitor will be available after the show on SABC Digital News. You look at our playlist there, look for Media Monitor, you'll be able to watch the show after it has been.
I'll also go watch the show after it's aired. Thank you so much. That's Didi Mekuto, our digital news producer, and he was bringing us the big hashtags of this week. It's time for a quick ad break, and after that, we look into the audit outcomes of 2015 and 2016 shortly after this break.
This is SABC News Prime Time, live from Johannesburg. Police have made a massive drugs bust in Alicia on the Cape Flat. They seized Mandrax tablets worth 26 million rand. The 529,000 Mandrax tablets seized were hidden in an underground storage facility. A scavenging insect which has destroyed tomato fields abroad has been spotted locally. Several organizations are working together to fend off this potential catastrophe. In 2008, it jumped the Mediterranean from Spain and caused havoc in 15 African countries.
Welcome back. The Auditor General released the much-anticipated audit report this week. The audit was carried out through 315 SOEs. The report largely highlights the gross mismanagement of funds by SOEs amounting to 46 billion rand, with PRASA pointed out as the biggest culprit, having mismanaged a staggering 13.9 billion rand. But here's more on this clip.
One of the notable issues we are highlighting in the report, also in our assessment of the state-owned entities, is the whole area of financial sustainability continuing to be a major risk. I think we're looking at this from the point of view of the weakening capacity of their balance sheets to deal with some of the future needs. And we have flagged the issue of financial sustainability as one of the major risks going forward. And also, the audit outcomes of quite a number of them also have been negatively affected by issues of weakness in leadership and governance, as well as instability of leadership at board levels and vacancies in key positions.
No, gentlemen, I'm just worried about that figure. 46 billion rand, that is a huge amount of money. Shani?
It is, especially considering that South Africa is only a $350 billion economy. That's a massive amount of money that obviously is not being spent according. But I think it's important for us to note that they're talking about procedures not being adhered to. Although some media groups have been saying basically that's euphemism for corruption. But I think what certainly has been proven is that certain procedures were not adhered to in terms of spending that money. We don't have concrete proof to say that actually this was a result of corruption. So I think it's important to make that distinction as well.
It's very shocking, though. I mean, 46 billion rand in a time where the students are crying for funding, and we're struggling in terms of the infrastructure as well as the economy. I mean, where's this money going to? Debo?
Yeah, I think it's quite unfortunate that we have such a large amount of irregular expenditure, particularly because we are a developing country, and we need to be as prudent as we can be in terms of our spending. If you look at what the PRASA issue, they accounted for 30%. 30% of all That's irregular expenditure, and it was largely due to the locomotives deal of the 4,000 locomotives which were purchased, of which didn't work in South Africa. And so we need to think about that. And I think equally, we also need to give credit where it is due. PRASA has moved from a deficit of 1 trillion, just over 1 trillion, and they've moved it down to 300 million. And I think these things, they're not really reported as much as they should, because we need to really have a balanced approach in the way that we are reporting, so that we know that, okay, these are the issues that you're dealing with, these are the things that you're doing well, keep doing them well, but we really need you to take this seriously. And heads must roll. Yeah,
that's one of the solutions. But what do you think are the major contributors to this massive mismanagement of funding, Sean?
Well, I think more is still to be revealed. Remember,
accountability?
Certainly, the chairperson of PRASA did come out to say that we are aware of this. In fact, one of the reasons why you're seeing these huge figures is because we have instituted our own internal audit to try and make sure that our governance processes are jacked up. I think certainly it speaks to volumes about the lack of proper good governance within PRASA. But let's wait and see what the chairperson, Mpumalanga, is going to do, because he said he has obviously commissioned an audit report, and after that, obviously, they intend to put some processes and procedures in place to improve the governance of the institution.
What do you think is the biggest contributing factor, Debo?
I think it's more an issue around governance. Governance is a very critical aspect of running any organization. And you need to, really acquaint people with the procedures of spending money, which signatures are necessary, which due processes need to be followed in order for you to allocate the budget and to spend the budget. And so perhaps the training is not there. I do know that we do spend a lot of money on management consultants. And I think from that aspect, that's very positive. but we need to now see the fruits coming out. And I actually think that if you look at it, perhaps it could be the fact that there's not much of a penalty for the guilty parties. There's not much that happens if you are seen to not following the correct procedures. And I think we need to now look at, okay, if you do not follow the procedures, these are the consequences. So that we can clean up, our government, so that we can also teach people, because once you get in there, you will know that this is how we do things. You cannot go the other way. If you do, these are the consequences.
Just to bring more force into that argument, Deboho, there was a call this week after the AG released the report, maybe for him to get more powers so that he actually can exercise his recommendations. I think that's a good call, Ashoni. What do you think?
No, absolutely. But just to put more weight into what Deboho was saying earlier, I think the fact that in a lot of our public institutions, there is no stick, in terms of when people actually do something wrong, when they're found to, there's no accountability, absolutely, and that is, to me, a troubling issue that, But that's what they're saying,
they're saying the EG needs to get more powers so that if, he finds that you don't have a clean audit, then there must be repercussions.
I'd like to enter there. Because we also have to debate the PMFA, the Public Finance Management Act. We need to debate that issue, because it has also excluded a lot of black businesses from doing business with government. And in order for them to be empowered, you'd have to go around the PFMA in order to empower these businesses. And that's why you see a lot of the contracts going to white-owned companies and continuing the economic structure that we see currently. And so we need to also see, of that 46 billion, how much was it of trying to empower, these black-owned companies? And because the PFMA does not allow them to, then you then went around and looked for other ways to empower them. And perhaps we need to change the PFMA in order to suit black-owned companies, so we can solve the structural inequalities of our economy.
Oh, you're a businessman, Shani. What do you think about that narrative?
Well, I agree with the sentiment, but you don't let the law follow behavior. You need to change the PFMA first and then let's. So the agency could be. How quickly can we change the PFMA? Because yes, he's right. There's a need to try and see more procurement happen from black-owned businesses, not the ones with farms, but real black-owned businesses. Because this is one of the biggest challenges in this country. That we have supposedly black-owned businesses. Well, the director is a cleaner. It's very, very, very troubling. And those businesses continue to rake in billions from public sector tenders.
You know what I found interesting, gentlemen? I mean, the Western Cape, I think it's for the third year in running now, came up on top with a 70% clean audit, followed by Gauteng, and then KZN, I think it was around 30-something%. What do you make of this? I mean, it seems like we're seeing the same picture almost every year.
Actually, it seemed to have gotten a bit worse this time around. Yes, and certainly from the quantum of the amount of money we're talking about has definitely increased. So that is definitely
there's
troubling.
more qualified audits, but there's bigger mismanagement of funding.
Absolutely. So those who were doing badly seem to have done spectacularly badly, whereas there are obviously other municipalities that seem to be trying to do better. I think one of the things that was raised a long time ago, which kind of resulted in previously Pravin Gordhan moving to the corporate governance, cooperative governance, was so that we can actually improve the management of municipalities. But obviously, other things happen along the way and is back at finance. But there's clearly a greater need of skills to move from provincial level government to municipal level government, because that's where the implementation of government programs happen. And if you don't have the proper skills, you'll see money being either not spent or spent badly.
A lot of people are saying, then why is government continuing to keep on putting money into these SOEs instead of just privatizing them?
Well, a lot of the SOEs are actually funded by asset management companies. As you saw recently, one of the companies said that they're going to withdraw their funding, and they had to have a meeting with various state-owned enterprises. And so it is a balance of the two that has positives and negatives. I think as African countries, we need to look at a way that we can increase our capital base so that we can fund the state-owned enterprises, within our country, and not, rely on, international companies to come and fund and then tell us how we're going to manage the money.
Yeah, absolutely. It's our own money. Well, access to land is still one of the biggest issues here in South Africa, but more details on that story after this break.
Make your house ultra homey with Macro's big festive season savings on appliances like Samsung inverter air conditioners now 8,599 each, save 2,000 Rand. A Philips air fryer and hand blender combo, get both for only 1,999 and save 1,000 Rand. And how cool is the Hisense 340-litre frost-free fridge for 5,999, save 500 Rand. Share in these and other big festive savings for home, for business, for life. Only at Macro, big on life.
Welcome back. Former Deputy Chief Justice Judge Dikgang Moseneke touched on the sensitive topic of land in his presentation to the Helen Suzman Foundation earlier this week. He warned that land inequity may eventually lead to an uprising here in South Africa. Now, many feel that the pace of land reform is rather slow and biased, but in other cases it invokes images of land being stolen from black people under apartheid. For others, mainly whites, it incites fear of being evicted from their farms, echoing Zimbabwe's forceful approach. President Jacob Zuma said what happened to Victor Mlotshwa opens debate about access to land. Here's more on this insert.
In this regard, allow me to strongly condemn the painful treatment meted out to Mr. Victor Mlotshwa from Middelburg, who was beaten up, put in a coffin, and threatened with being burned alive by two men who reportedly accused him of trespassing. This matter has also brought into sharper focus the question of access to land by black people. Government continues to look for ways of speeding up the process and also to support those who have regained the land to use it profitably.
The land reform issue is a contentious issue here in South Africa, but it doesn't seem like we're getting anywhere with this debate. Tebogo, let's start with you.
Yeah, I think whoever controls the land of a country controls the country. That's my opinion. And I think when we went into the period of apartheid, what started was the land dispossession of Africans, where we were segregated, our land was stolen, and then we were used as slaves in order to build an economy for the settlers. Mm-hmm. And I think that we must take this matter very seriously. We do not own South Africa if we do not own the land in South Africa. An important question that we need to ask ourselves also is that we are in this situation currently. What is the way forward? How do we move forward together? And I think the togetherness is a very important aspect in that we need to be very mature, very pragmatic also, but also radical in our approach because it is an immediate challenge. And people need to access the land, they need to work the land and be a part of the economy. And so I agree with Justice Dikgang Moseneke. He says that we need a Marshall Plan in order to deal with land redistribution. The Marshall Plan was implemented by General George Marshall. He was a representative of the banks, and that was after some of the world wars. And if you look at it, there was a student from Harvard University, Malcolm Crawford, and he wrote a thesis in his master's around how to, rebuild Europe. And this was bought into and implemented. And I think this is what we need to understand, that we need to move beyond our oral tradition and start moving towards written culture. Written culture needs to be a part of our current culture, because we need to look at developing literature that will assist us in implementing a plan, a very pragmatic plan to take us forward and redistribute the land.
And how do we affect that then?
Well, let me just start by acknowledging the fact that actually I think the government has actually been doing quite, the Department of Rural Development and Land Affairs has actually been doing quite a bit to actually change the current, excuse the pun, landscape when it comes to issue of land ownership. If you just look at the media clippings around October, I mean, there were so many programs. I'm looking at one in particular where they're talking about 9,000 black-owned farms being assisted by the department, and there are private sector entities like your Tiger Brands who are involved in helping black emerging farmers. But yes, the challenge remains. The progress of land reform is still quite slow. In fact, last month there were about 300 black farmers who marched to the department actually demanding that the pace be increased. So they're not saying the department is not doing anything, they're saying the pace needs to increase. However, it does bring me back to a conversation that our Deputy President Cyril Ramaphosa once had with the Oppenheimers back then. The issue was around mines, and this is actually in his book, where at the time he was quite, his view was quite leftist about repossession of mines and so on. And this Oppenheimer senior said, Mr. Ramaphosa, do you know what a mine without capital is? It's a giant hole in the ground. And we need to understand that the same principle applies with land. It has to be done in an orderly fashion. Otherwise, we chase capital, we will have the land, but we'll have nothing to do with it. So we need to understand that the issues at stake here, like food security. So how do we make sure that we increase the pace? Perhaps the Marshall Plan for land in South Africa is the answer. I don't know. But my argument is that it has to be done in an orderly fashion. And of course, the government's hands are actually tied on this one, because we're using the willing buyer, willing seller, willing buyer principle. And if there are no willing seller, which means there will be no buyers, essentially. And those are some of the things that we probably need to look into.
And Justice Maseneke did say that willing buyer, willing seller is not in the spirit of the Constitution. And so we need to move towards expropriation. But then we need to ask ourselves, how do we expropriate the land and ensure that the land remains productive, in a way that is not going to destabilize our economy. But we shouldn't look at the land question in horror. We look at it as if we start to redistribute the land, we're headed for a horror movie in real time. No, it's not. That's not the case. In fact, if we do not redistribute the land, that is where the horror movie is coming, because people will revolt. And so it is a national security threat, the issue of the redistribution of land.
It has divided the nation, precisely.
It has. My colleague Shoni is giving also a bit of a balanced view in terms of there are programs which have been in place. Perhaps the pace is not fast enough, but also I think we need a plan.
But then what do we need to do to increase that pace then?
I think we need I think we need a plan. And that plan, we all need to buy into the plan.
Yes. Don't we have a current plan?
I don't know if the plan is working.
So we need another plan.
Those who obviously are involved in the food production are arguing that no, we are a critical part of the economy, so you can't just take the land away from us, because then we're going to have food shortages. Now the question is, do we not have any other land available that could also be used for that purpose, and then fast track the moving of emerging black farmers into those areas? Perhaps that is the question. And if that is the situation, then we have to review the willing seller, willing buyer, to say, you know what, at a certain date, we have to have achieved such and such targets in terms of land redistribution. And that will maybe force some of the people who are sitting on the fence, on the sidelines, and to say, you know what, we'll wait until, it gets a little tougher.
Look, I mean, just this week in KZN, some residents in a community actually chased or had clashes with the sugarcane farmers, saying that these people are actually taking advantage of the people in the community and their land.
And that's what happens, in our current society. And in order for us to change that, we need the people, the majority of the country, to also have a stake in the economy. It doesn't make any sense for the majority of the country not to have much of a stake in the economy. I want us to go into the statistics. 79% of all land in South Africa is privately owned, and that is according to the Department of Rural Development. However, there hasn't been a credible land audit done in our country. So we need to ask ourselves, if there hasn't been a credible land audit done in our country, are we really serious about redistributing the land? 86% of agricultural land in the Free State is white owned. In a country that consists of 79% black people. That is not even sustainable for the white farmer. It is a danger to the white farmer. And therefore it is in all our interests to deal with this issue, to redistribute the land, and also perhaps look also at the land that is currently available. How do we distribute that land? And then we look at the other possibilities moving forward.
Well, the president warned against taking the Zimbabwe stance on this issue, which, chasing out the white farmers completely, and then you left with what? Just a white elephant, and you're not doing anything with it.
Absolutely. And to go back to the issue of capital flight, the moment people realize that the rule of law no longer prevails, those who have money, those who invest, will simply take their money elsewhere. Now, I know that I'm not trying to paint a horror story here, but the bottom line is that is a reality. If you have money invested on behalf of, say, pension and pensioners and so on, you want to protect that money as much as possible. And a lot of money that's invested in our economy is actually going to cater for those people. So it has to be protected, and people will simply withdraw that money, especially if it's coming from foreign investors. But also, back into the issue of land specifically, there is land, a lot of land that is actually under the control of traditional leaders. Yeah. Why can't we re-look into that issue so that we're able to then give title deeds to people who live in those communities, and then, in a way, fast-track part of this land redistribution?
So it talks about a new plan. A new plan is needed here.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, that's where we leave it. We're going to take a look at the State Security Minister's woes after this break. Do stay with us.
Information-hungry viewers stay with SABC News, as issues on the West are different from issues on the East or here in Johannesburg. So it is not surprising that people who follow the news know that there are two things for sure: that anything can happen, and SABC News will tell you when it does. Because we keep the nation fully informed. We are SABC News.
Welcome back to Media Monitor. Now, allegations have emerged in an Al Jazeera investigation last weekend that Minister of State Security David Mahlobo has close ties with a Mpumalanga businessman known to be involved in illegal rhino horn trade. Guang Jiang showed pictures he took with the minister, claiming that Mahlobo was a regular client of his. The minister, however, has denied the claims and says he has never been to the man's house and that the allegations made against him are baseless. Here's more on this insert.
I'm not a friend of the person. The person does not say I'm a friend. The person says he knows me very well and how I visit the spa treatment. Therefore, this thing about friendship that is becoming a big issue, international and local, is a phallus and it seeks to defame me. Have I ever gone to their house? I've never been to the man's house. I don't even know where his house is.
So the minister says they're not friends.
I think Gwang is trying to, fatten his profits in his establishment by being associated with a high-profile individual. Well, let's remember that, these are still just allegations. However, I will still stress that if you're a minister, the places you visit, especially a minister of state security, I think these places you visit on a regular basis certainly have to be vetted. But this is a clear sign of Mr. Gwang just trying to, this is PR at its best, and he's done very well for himself. But I think he should probably leave the minister alone.
So you're saying it's a self-imposed endorsement?
I think
it's a forced endorsement.
All evidence seems to suggest that the gentleman is trying to, if also I had an opportunity for the minister to visit my business, I will certainly treat it.
You'll take plenty of
assuming
pictures.
that obviously that is the minister of good reputation, and that might actually increase the the respectability of my establishment. But I think,
but gentlemen, the seriousness of this story has brought about the fact that a lot of people are saying, how can our state security minister then, even if it's allegations, be associated with rhino syndicates? Then what does it say about our intelligence?
Yeah, well, it's a very tricky one. If you look at, he's been suspected of rhino poaching. Apparently, he's well known. If he's well known, I don't know why he's not in prison. First of all.
Exactly.
Secondly, I've had the opportunity of meeting the US President Barack Obama, and how he does his taking pictures. He does vet you first. He vets the people he takes pictures with, and if he hasn't vetted you, you'll be shaking hands from afar. You will not be standing next to him taking a picture. But that's the President of the United States, and even their marketing industry has developed over many decades. In our country, we still need to work on the media training around how do you develop your reputation, how do you protect your reputation, because you do want to feel accessible to the people. You don't want somebody to say, Minister, can I have a picture? And you say, no, let's check.
Like,
send me your ID
minister,
number. Send me your ID number. Let me vet you first. You don't want situations like that. And it's not really a part of our African culture to behave like that. But perhaps we do need to look into how do you manage the people who you take pictures with? How do you minimize the strangers you take pictures with? And then how do you deal with an issue where there's a slip up, you took a picture with the wrong person, and then how do you respond to that? I think disassociation is very important. He needs to disassociate with himself with the character. He needs to say, I will not visit that spy anymore because he's suspected of being a flawed character, and I'll take my business elsewhere.
Quick one, Shani.
Well, I think to the minister's credit, he was quick to actually distance himself from the gentleman, and clearly he feels this is something that needs to come out. That they're not friends. He doesn't visit his house, and he just happened to go there, and somebody took advantage. Unfortunately, if that is the case.
All right. Well, that's where we're going to leave it on that topic. We're going to take another quick ad break, and after that, more Media Monitor. Do stay with us.
Whether you're looking for a restaurant, public transport, or a university, a lot of us use our smartphone apps to find the closest one. On Network, we chat to those who play a role in Africa's tech space.
We have taken financial services closer to the people. Mobile penetration is pretty high.
Apple take 30%, keep 70%.
On Network, we give you Africa's social media and technology news. That's Network with Ms. Phumelele Zondi every Sunday at 7:30 p.m. Central African Time.
Welcome back. We're still talking about the minister's allegations, or as Shoni calls it, the publicity stunt there from Guang, who says, he knows the minister, they are friends. But, let's talk about the seriousness of this. The implications to the reputation of the institution here. Let's talk about that, Shoni.
No, absolutely. And also, I think the fact that so many people took to the news, in a way, kind of speaks to the number of allegations and scandals that has rocked our government. So suddenly, even when something that is under normal circumstances extremely far-fetched, we tend to believe it because why not? Everything else seems to be happening along them lines. And it's unfortunate because subsequently, obviously, the reputation of the institution he leads also is in jeopardy.
Look, a lot of people are saying he denied being friends with Mcebo Dlamini in Parliament and later retracted that statement, though. So what does it say about his friendship with Guang?
Well, as the Minister of State Security, there are certain things that you do that are classified. So you might have
can't he have his own friends?
He can, but for instance, the Mcebo Dlamini issue where he said one thing and then said the opposite thing. Some of your meetings are classified. And so you do have a right to say, no, I didn't meet this person, when you in fact met that person. Because obviously you're strategizing around a national security threat. Of course it's very embarrassing, for you to say one thing and be caught saying another, especially in these current times.
They hold you to account. So Shoni, yes.
Absolutely. And the unfortunate thing sometimes with politicians is that only when there is concrete evidence that they've actually done something will they then say, oh, okay, then you caught me, I've done it. And it makes it difficult for people to take them at their words. So that's why it's a very difficult one. But I think for now, we'll give him the benefit of the doubt and actually just believe that, yeah, indeed, no relationship exists with Mr. Wang. And Mr. Wang, as I said, is engaged in high-level PR activity here.
So then you don't think this is serious enough to warrant Mahlobo's resignation?
No, that's not...
it's still allegations,
which
he has come out to deny?
I think it would be incumbent on him to decide that, whether or not it warrants a resignation. I actually wanted to speak about the Al Jazeera story, because for me it was very one-sided. Specifically when you're talking about a government official, that affects our reputation as a country, internationally as an investment destination, and our credibility from a governance perspective, and our security as a nation. And I think Al Jazeera should have given the State Security Minister, a right of reply at least. For him to say, no, I don't know this person, and to respond. They didn't give him that opportunity. They assumed that the one source was saying
Isn't that infringing media law?
Well, I think back into the issue of whether he should resign or not. If it is found that the relationship is indeed real, then there's definitely good grounds for him to actually consider resignation. But then we don't do that here in this country. Brian Melefor really started a new path here that we don't usually experience. People just even implicated. Because as with the case with Brian, he's just been implicated. And here, the minister has also been implicated. However, even if it's found that the relationship is real, then I think there's absolute grounds for him to resign. He shouldn't walk, he should run from that post.
Mushin Etochal resigned first there, Shoni. That's where we're going to leave it. Well, Statistician General Pali Lehohla did not mince his words in Parliament when he told parliamentarians that free higher education is not a reality. He said until government puts education top of its priority list, the challenges are going to continue. Lehohla said universities are not financially ready for next year and many are running on a budget deficit and aren't adequately funded, which resulted in the fees must fall movement. Here's more in this short insert.
These things are made visible as priorities unless we see that we are in a precipice as a country. If we don't emphasize education, then there is no way in which politically we can mobilize this to be a priority. The numbers show it. Those who are 15 to 24, the biggest driver of their problems is educational attainment. And if they don't achieve that, there's no future.
We will certainly have to improve, our our mobilization strategy, perhaps even repackage our messaging so that our young people truly see value in education.
We are going to see more protests. I'll tell you why, because costs will continue to go up and universities will once again have to put up their fees. So in the middle of the year we will again have a round of fees being put up, and again we will have a round of protests about it, and again we might resolve it by putting more millions or billions into universities, but once more it'll be an ad hoc solution.
When the system through its programs and policy direction can no longer help the poor, it means that the poor, by virtue of being poor, will just fall into the cracks of poverty. This is what is going to be worse going forward.
What do you make of those utterances about financial readiness at universities, Sean?
Well, it's quite a major concern because on any given year, you have self-funding students who struggle to pay for their fees. Now you have a situation where fees must fall have actually entertained hopes among many parents that actually we may not have to pay. So they delayed payments, and also we understand that obviously a lot of the students who usually get support from NSFAS actually did not apply for funding because also they were anticipating free education, and obviously that is not going to materialize anytime soon, putting even more pressure on universities. So we are facing a really dire situation. Our universities are facing a very serious situation come 2017.
I'm just concerned about next year's intake. What happens, particularly to those students who are supposed to apply for NSFAS?
Yeah, it's a very difficult situation because before we can even consider free education, we also have to accept the fact that NSFAS does not cater for all poor students. You know, we're talking free education for all. You know, not free education just for poor students. Yeah. And I think what the SG General is saying currently is that it's not sustainable for you to have free education for all. It's just not financially possible. But we have to go back to our constitution, which says that access to education needs to be progressively increased. It doesn't say necessarily that you should be giving free education. But what is the trend? I think the trend is unconstitutional because we've seen a reversal of a lot of the gains made because the budget keeps decreasing. But then the amount of funds that are required for you to obtain tertiary education keeps increasing. You know, and that makes it less and less affordable for poor students. So I think the first question we need to ask ourselves is NSFAS adequately funding the students? No. What are we going to do about that? Let's first solve what we have currently. And then we need to look into the issue of free education to say, is it for all? Is it for the poor students? And what is the plan to implement this free education?
Yeah, look, you know, my concern is, all these utterances now, we still have a commission that is sitting and looking at the feasibility of free education in the country, and we're only expecting that report later on next year. So, what happens now? What should people be thinking about these utterances?
The bigger concern also is the annual output of graduates, particularly people like nurses and doctors.
Yeah.
So if we disturb that flow, you know, we're going to have fewer professionals in various critical areas where we're not able to fill those positions because we have not managed to produce the regular number of of those professionals that the system expects each year.
And it's very interesting how it connects to the land issue, because the Marshall Plan was implemented by a master's student. You know, it came up by a thesis from a master's student, and that is directly connected to the education system. The plans for us to move forward as a country and to have shared prosperity, you know, a lot of those plans are going to come from our academics and institutions of higher learning, and we need more black academics, you know, in order for them to look at issues in order to solve the economic disparities of the country.
But now, if things are not dealt with properly regarding this whole financial status of high institutions, what is likely to happen? Another fees must fall protest, or are we going to do away with tuition eventually? We have to do something.
No, absolutely. I think the immediate impact is the fact that universities will probably suffer in terms of the quality of the education that they offer.
That's true.
Because certainly they might have to cut back on certain things. You know, if you are used to accommodating 100 physics students in your lab, you might have to, make do with fewer experiments to make sure that all of those are able to go through the same process, and that is not a desirable state of affairs.
Yeah, and I think we use a lot of the examples like Germany. South Africa is not like Germany. We're not a manufacturing hub like Germany. We don't have the amount of revenue that Germany has. And in fact, our entire budget is their education budget. So it's not apples and apples comparing ourselves with Germany. But it is perhaps an aspiration that we should lead to be like countries like Germany that do offer, free education. And Finland is also another example of what we can aspire to be like. But I think what is missing in our country and in a lot of the debates that we're having is the planning, strategizing. You need to be very effective and meticulous in your complex planning, because such things cannot be implemented just through rhetoric. I'm poor, therefore education must be free. No, we must have a strategy to ensure that that is possible. And then we need also a strategy to ensure that it's sustainable. And I hope that our debate can be more sophisticated because we have a current issue. Next year, people are going to be registering. A lot of poor students will not qualify for NEFSAs. And they will not get bursaries either. And that is potentially going down the drain.
So let's look at long-term solutions then, gentlemen. Shouldn't we be, isn't that the debate that we're supposed to be having? I know that there's been a lot of cries around the private sector. They need to do more. But let's also look at this. If we did have free education in the country, that means how many millions of students are able to go to universities? What happens? Where are we going to get the jobs for all these qualified students?
Well, for me, let's start with where are we going to get the 70 billion or so that will be required to offer free tertiary education in this country, because we have a lot of competing priorities in the country. We're talking about the land issue, to redistribute that. If we're using seller willing buyer, a lot of money has to be spent and a lot of other programs. So as it is, the education budget is one of the fastest rising budgets in our government. So I'm wondering if we haven't reached the ceiling. If we're not going to reach the ceiling very quickly. But certainly, we have to find a way of accommodating deserving students so that no one is denied higher education who's capable and willing. I think we need to start there and then see over time if we are able and if it's that is the right strategy, because there's an issue about do people value things that they get for free? And what does that do to the quality of the education in the period that we're offering that free education? So if we can manage to maintain the quality of education, increase more students coming into the education system, certainly that is good for the country, because if you look at some of the most fast developing economies, they're competitive because they're producing more new knowledge, from research and so on. And that is critical to how quickly we're going to become a South Korea or a China.
Deputy Minister there of Higher Education, Manan, did allude to the fact that they do know that there is problems with the current NSFAS funding model, and they are going to relook at that. But I mean, how do you determine the poor students from the deserving ones and those who don't deserve? Because people are saying, we want to go to school. How do you determine whether I deserve to or not and qualify according to how much my parents make at the end of the year? It's not fair.
In my opinion, you should qualify if you're a previously disadvantaged student, period. That's my opinion. And if you say that you can't afford the fees, then you should be provided a loan. I mean, that's the bare minimum. And I think that if you are totally impoverished, that is where your education should be free. And if there's no way that you're going to be able to, pay back the loan, also improve the situation of your family, then it should.
Gentlemen, unfortunately, Shoni, I'm so sorry. That's where we're going to have to leave it today. Mr. Shoni Makari, as well as Mr. Teboho Ditseho, thank you so much for watching our Show Media Monitor today. We hope that you join us again, same time and place next week. I'm back on top of the hour with our AM News.